The Story of Gideon. Now the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and so the Lord gave them into the hands of Midian, their pagan enemies, for 7 years. And the Midianites attacked the Israelites and would burn their fields whenever the Israelites would plant them. The Midianites would draw up their armies and destroy their oxen and their sheep. They would come like locusts over the land of Israel. And the people of Israel cried for help to the Lord. And God sent a prophet to the people of Israel who reminded them, saying, "The Lord brought you out of Egypt and delivered you from the hands of the Egyptians. But you have begun to worship the false pagan gods of the Amorites, and so I have allowed the Midianites to attack you." Now it was at this time that there was a young man named Gideon, who one day was beating out wheat in a winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And an angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Gideon replied, "Pray, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all these evil things befallen us? Where are all the wonderful deeds which our fathers told us about how the Lord delivered us from Egypt? But now the Lord has turned away from us and delivered us into the hands of the pagan Midianites." Then the angel said to Gideon, "Go, deliver Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Do not I send you?" Gideon replied, "How can I deliver Israel? Behold, my family is the weakest in all of Manasseh, and I am the weakest of my family." The Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall smite the Midianites as one man." Gideon replied to the angel, "If I have found favor with you, then please show me a sign that it is you who speaks to me, and do not leave here until I come back and bring you a present and set it in front of you." The angel replied, "I will stay here until you return." So Gideon went into his house and slaughtered a baby lamb and made unleavened cakes from flour. And he took them and brought them in a pot to the angel and presented them. And the angel said to Gideon, "Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock and pour the broth over them." And Gideon did so. Then the angel of the Lord reached out and touched the tip of his staff to the meat and the cakes, and there sprang up a fire from the rock and consumed the flesh and the unleavened bread. Then the angel vanished from Gideon's sight. When Gideon perceived that this was an angel of the Lord, Gideon said, "Alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen an angel of the Lord face to face." But the Lord said to him, "Peace be to you, do not fear, you shall not die." Then and there Gideon built an altar to the Lord and called it, "The Lord is Peace." That night the Lord said to him, "Take your father's bowl and the second bowl, 7 years old, and pull down the altar of the false pagan god Baal, which your father has, and cut down the statue of Asherah that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord God on top of the stronghold here, with stones laid in due order. Then take the second bowl and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the statue of the false god Asherah, which you will have cut down." So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it secretly by night. The next day, when the men of the town arose, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the statue of Asherah beside it was cut down, and a second bowl was offered upon the altar which Gideon had built. And the men of the town said to one another, "Who has done this thing?" And after they had searched, they said, "Gideon, the son of Joash, has done this." Then the men of the town went to Gideon's father Joash and said, "Bring out your son, that he may die. We wish to kill him, for he has pulled down the altar of Baal and cut down the statue of Asherah beside it." But Joash said to all those who were against him, will you fight for Baal, or will you let Baal defend himself? If he is a god, let him fight for himself, because it is his altar that has been pulled down." The Midianites and the Amalekites and the other pagans from the east came together and crossed the Jordan River and camped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord took possession of Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet, and many men came out to follow Gideon. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too were called out to follow him. And Gideon sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they all went up to meet him. Gideon said to God, "If thou wilt deliver Israel by my hand as thou hast said, behold, I will lay a fleece of wool on the threshing floor, and if there is dew on the fleece alone, and dry in the ground, then I shall know that you will deliver Israel by my hand, as you have said. Give me a sign, Lord." The next morning, Gideon found that it was so. There was dew on the fleece, but the ground was dry. When Gideon rose the next morning and saw this, he wrung the fleece until there was no more water in it. Then Gideon prayed to God, "Let not your anger burn against me. Please let me ask one more time. Please, I will leave the fleece on the threshing floor once again, but this time let the fleece be dry, and let the ground be wet." And so it was once again the next night, except this time, just as Gideon had asked, the fleece was dry and the ground was wet. In this way Gideon knew that the Lord was calling him. Then Gideon set up camp with all the soldiers and men who had assembled to fight for him. But the Lord said to Gideon, "The men that you have are too many for me to give the Midianites into your hands, lest Israel turn and say, 'We have delivered ourselves on our own strength, not God's.' Now therefore, listen to what I am saying. Go to your men and say, 'Whoever is fearful and trembling, go, return home.'" So Gideon went and told his soldiers, "Anyone who wishes, who is fearful and trembling, may go and return home." Many men left, 22,000 in all, and only 10,000 soldiers remained. Again the Lord spoke to Gideon, "The soldiers are still too many. The army is too large. I want you to take them down to the water, and I will let you know which ones to send home and which ones to bring to battle." So Gideon brought the men down to the water just as the Lord had said. And the Lord spoke to Gideon, saying, "Every man that cups water in his hands and laps it up as a dog would lap it up, those men I want you to bring to battle. But every soldier who kneels down to drink his water, I want you to send home." Gideon watched and counted, and when he saw a man drinking and lapping from his hands, he set him aside and marked him to bring him to battle. When the men were done, all the men were to be sent home except for only 300 soldiers. Meanwhile, below in the valley, a giant army of Midianites and other pagans had assembled. That same night the Lord said to Gideon, "Arise, go down against the camp in the valley, for I have given it into your hand. But if you have fear in your heart, sneak down into the camp with your servant, and listen to what the Midianites are saying." So Gideon slipped down into the pagan camp with his servant. There the pagan Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east lay along the valley like locusts in a multitude. Their camels were without number. When Gideon came down, spying secretly, behold, one pagan soldier was telling his dream to another pagan soldier and said, "I had a dream. There was a cake of barley bread, and it tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned upside down, and the tent was destroyed." His pagan comrade answered, "This is no other than the sword of Gideon, a man of Israel. God will give him victory over all of us." When Gideon heard them, Telling the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped God, and then returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand." He divided the 300 soldiers into 3 companies, and put trumpets into the hands of all of them, and empty jars with torches inside of the jars. And he said to them, "Look at me, and do as I do. When I come to the edge of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpets also on every side of the camp, and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon!'" So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the edge of the camp, silently, in the middle of the night. And just as the pagan soldiers had changed the watchguards, Gideon blew his trumpet, and all Gideon's men blew their trumpet, and they smashed the jars that were in their hands. And they cried, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" When the pagan soldiers heard this commotion, they cried out and fled, even fighting against each other in the dark. Then Gideon and his army drew their swords and set upon the pagan army and drove them far, far away into the night. After this, Gideon chased down the pagan rulers who had led the army against Israel and killed them all. And Gideon and his men took much gold from the pagans and made a special ornament for the Lord and kept it in the city. Long after, the Israelites would worship the ornament instead of the one true God, and it would become a downfall to them, a snare. But in the meantime, Midian and the other pagans were subdued and did not attack the people of Israel anymore. The men of Israel were thrilled with this victory and came to Gideon, saying, "You must be our king and rule over us." But Gideon answered, "I will not be your king. God will be your king, and only God shall rule over Israel." In this way, Gideon refused to become Israel's king. Gideon lived to an old age, but as soon as he died, the people of Israel turned against God once again and worshipped the false god Baal and other pagan gods.